And once again, a huge shout out to all of our financial supporters over at patreon.com/878survivor FM. All of our production managers, Shane Murphy, Tank Dazza, Hawks Hammer. Our producers, Red Freedom, thank you all so much for your generous support over all of this time. Next, a huge thanks to all of our YouTube members, all of our emote bandits, our 87.8 survivors, King Alobar, Raymond Normoyle, Marson P2, Melbourne's Adventures, Pettywetty, The Greedy Peasant, Sauerkraut, and The Receding Man. And our two podcast bosses, Kenny Baker and Foxy Pote. All of you are legends who help the shows go on each and every week. Thank you all for your support, even just by watching or listening, and we hope you enjoy this week's show. And we are live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the spotlight on Road to Vostok. We are joined today by Auntie. How you doing, buddy?
Hello, thanks for having me.
Mate, thank you for agreeing to come on. Now we've got 20-odd people in here. There's a lot of excitement about this game, mate. A lot of excitement. It's something very different to a lot of the games in this genre that we're seeing come out at the moment, this survival post-apocalyptic sort of genre. Nearly everyone seems to be going for the multiplayer, and you're going for the single player, which, yeah, I know there's some people, like I run primarily a DayZ community, and some people were quite excited when they found out it was single player, and they're like, oh no. But I admire you for bucking the trend and trying something different. But we're going to talk more about the game soon. I want to find out a bit more about you, because you're quite a fascinating person. You're going to have to translate the I'm guessing that's Finnish comments there in chat from Chost.
One moment.
Pivafi, I think it's I probably
it's just good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How badly did I butcher that?
Pretty bad.
I actually found out not that long ago that I have some DNA from the Finland, Norway sort of region as well, which I had no idea I had in me. So that was quite interesting and fascinating. But yeah, so back to you, mate. Single person running a game. Wow. What got you into game development? Because some people are aware you've got a military background as well.
Yeah, my journey to game dev started back in 2012, and in Finland at that time we haven't had much big success in the game industry. There were like major studios like Remedy and some other which make Max Payne and all those international games, but back then there wasn't this big mobile game boom, which started later on involving Rovio and Supercell and those companies. So back then it was kind of like unsecure for me to hop into game dev. So I kind of like deviated to military. But basically what got me into game dev was DayZ, the original DayZ mod, and also the game Alan Wake, which was made in Finland. So I kind of like got immersed to this post-apocalyptic survival genre, and basically dreamed that one day I want to make video games. But that time it was kind of like a long goal. But in any ways, it started 10 years ago, and slowly over the time I got those skills together, and there was indeed some deviations to the military life, but I returned back to the game dev.
And how long did you do in the military?
Yeah, in Finland it's kind of like all based on this conscript service.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys have that, but in Finland, every 18-year-old male does that. And I went to that conscript service. I find that I enjoyed that life back then quite a lot. So I spent a whole year doing that. I went to like a platoon leader school during my conscript service, and after that there was kind of like a couple of odd jobs, and then I applied to Finnish National Defense University, which is kind of like same as USA have this West Point thing. So it's kind of same thing in Finland. I spent 3 years there, and then I became an active duty lieutenant. But during all those years, there was still this thought on back of my mind that someday I will return to game dev. And when during that military life, I was doing like at the same time improving my skills as a game developer and waiting that moment when I can transition to full-time game dev.
So it sounds like you're actually quite young. Do you mind if I ask how old you actually are right now?
Yeah, sure. I'm 29 years old.
Wow. That blows my mind. Like, I know just enough about game development to get myself in trouble trying to sound like I know what I'm talking about. And yourself, you've got quite a similar backstory to probably someone I'm going to guess is a bit of an idol of yours, Dean Hall. That military background, and then get into game development, and I literally wouldn't even know where to start with getting into that. You know, I just did another interview on the weekend with a guy who taught himself how to mod for DayZ, and he's now showing himself as one of the better ones. But to go from, do you have any other game development background or modding, or is this just your first foray into game development?
Yeah, I've been making small projects for 10 years, but this is the first like public project that is under my name solely, because I have made these like work for hire stuff and freelance stuff, and I was an asset publisher for a long time. But one of the main like experience in the game dev was that when I was doing all this freelancer and work for hire stuff, I transitioned to teaching game dev. So I spent 4 years as a visual game design teacher in city called Tampere in Finland. And I taught over 200 game dev students, nearly 50 game projects per year. It was kind of like fun times, because when you're working as a game dev teacher, you have this like bird's eye view on the game projects and how to like manage timelines and productions, because you're not involved directly, but you have to like learn those stuff in any way. And that teaching job was one of the main like skill boost for me, because when you're doing so many game projects for all those years, and most of the games involve mechanics and skills that you don't have maybe yet. For example, if you're indie game developer, you're probably interested in one of 2 different genres, and that's all. But when you're a teacher, you have to learn all of those genres, because if one student group wants to make a rally game and you're not personally interested about rally games, that doesn't matter. You still have to learn about rally games. And so all those years of like forced learning with different genres and styles and mechanics, it really like boosted my experience level to the point where I had all the skills and background needed for this project.
So, do you? I'll get to backtrack a little bit here. I'm assuming you've got a partner. Do you have any children or anything like that?
Not currently.
Not currently. Okay, so because I was sitting there wondering how you're juggling all of this, and it seems like such a big commitment to develop your own full game by yourself. You know, the hours you must be putting in every day must be absolutely insane.
I wouldn't say insane, but it definitely requires huge commitment and discipline to like keep up with the production and progress. But I can honestly say that I have also like planned my life in a way that I can be totally selfish in that sense that I can spend that amount of time to this. So this project and pre-production of this game is also kind of like partly required me to plan my life in a way that I can manage these hours, because if I had all those responsibilities now, this project would be much harder to do.
Do you have another job, or are you pretty much full-time focused on Road to Vostok now?
I'm full-time. I transitioned, I quit my job as a game dev teacher back in last June, and I became a full-time developer.
So this is a great time then, I think, to I'll put the links up again. But ladies and gentlemen, if you're interested in the game, one of the links that I just put up there is the Patreon, which would be a fantastic way for you to be able to continue to support what Auntie's doing here with Road to Vostok. I have signed up on behalf of the 87.8 community as well, as one of the patrons for it, because it's not like it's going to be a scam of any sort. We're just helping someone develop, and if we get a great game at the end of it, we've already got a working demo. Definitely consider checking out that Patreon. If I can bring it up, and we can. It looks like I've got a bad link in there. That's what the problem is. 1 second. That should, I'm just fixing it now. I've got no spaces. It's kind of weird. I love streaming on YouTube, but that should all work for you now, folks. So let's see if I can get the Patreon to open up this time. Nope, it still didn't work. My apologies, folks. There you go. That's the link right there. So that should work this time, and we will bring it up on screen. Patreon's a pretty good way to communicate, and one of the good things with the Road to Vostok is, unlike my own Patreon, Auntie's actually posting quite regularly on there, folks, and keeping those of us who are in the community up to date. Yeah, you can see there, just 4 days ago, did a post. So this is all in there, lots of information, and I can tell you he does actually read the messages if you send him, because that's how I've ended up with him as a guest on the show here, isn't it, Auntie?
Yeah, and I think transparency is like one of the major factors for this kind of early access survival game genre. So Patreon is kind of like the biggest way to have that transparency. But in other social medias, if Patreon is not for you, that's totally fine. I'm planning to keep up with this transparency and show all the things behind the scenes. So no hiding in this project.
Awesome. Okay, so hopefully that's all working now. The no, it still looks a mess. I'll have to have a look at that later, but we shall carry on. Okay, so what was the inspiration for Road to Vostok? You've got it's been described as elements of on the website itself. You do mention that it's got heavily inspired by Stalker. And yes, we will be doing questions beans, but we'll save those for a little bit later. If you do have a question around what Auntie and I are talking at the time, please post it. I try to be as interactive as possible when I'm doing interviews, because I'm only one person, and you guys and girls out there may have a better question than I do, or you may have an idea of something that you would like elaborated on. So yeah, so You've also in some of your dev blogs talked about your inspirations from DayZ, from other games. Just talk us through the development process from when you first started conceiving what you were going to go after.
Yeah, sure. There's multiple perspectives for this, but I'm going to start with 10 years ago, with that time when I played really actively the DayZ mod. And I'm sure your audience, who are all DayZ fans, probably know that famous airfield, Northwest Airfield, back in the up north. And I always really loved that like gameplay loop, even though that wasn't like rooted in the lore or anything. It was just an airport on the map, but still there was this like dangerous journey mentality. When you started on the coast, you slowly looted and prepared for your journey up to the north to that airfield, which was like really high PvP zone and high risk, high reward in terms of loot. And that gameplay loop was really compelling me back then. And like mentioned, DayZ was kind of like the first moment for me when I learned that I want to make these type of games in the future. But a couple of years ahead, Stalker indeed was big passion of mine. I really enjoyed the atmosphere of Stalker. DayZ being also in third person, and the graphical style is really nice back then. But Stalker kind of like sealed the deal for me in terms of the atmosphere that I wanted to create, and all the like the lore elements related to the zone. Even though Stalker has these like fantasy elements to it, monsters and mutants and so on, but basically combining that DayZ's gameplay loop to that Northwest Airfield and having that Stalker like atmosphere was really compelling to me. And then I kind of like mixed this mindset to place where I lived. I have been living most of my early years in a city called Hamina in Finland, which is about 30 kilometers from the border zone between Finland and Russia. And that border zone area has so many like cool nuances and history elements, and the environment there has really compelling locations for post-apocalyptic survival game. And then knowing that area and that road that leads to that border zone kind of like reminded me of that DayZ time when I thought the journey to the airfield. So that's basically the idea that started. I would say around 2014 was the first time I like really made notes about this idea and wrote to Vostok. But I wasn't ready to make this type of game back then, because it would have been a failure. I didn't have those skills yet. So I patiently waited all those years, almost 10 years, for this moment that I can start producing this game. So that's basically the early days of this project and inspirations. But along the line, Escape from Tarkov game, and it's kind of like was a confirmation that there's still room for these really hardcore games and no hand-holding, and having those really tough mechanics and RPG elements blended with FPS games. So there's also a bit of Escape from Tarkov in this project. But I would say the combine of those and also a little bit of Long Dark and Project Zomboid is the inspiration for this game.
And Project Zomboid is a bit of an underrated one that a lot of people forget about. But I haven't dabbled in it myself. It's on my wish list of games, but I'm a married man, and I've got my shows that I do on that as well. So time is we're all there, so time poor these days. But one of the aspects of Project Zomboid I hear spoken about quite highly is the crafting side of it, and I see that's one of the areas that you want to focus on in this game as well.
You're probably meaning the looting system, meaning the containers, and Project Zomboid is definitely underrated or not appreciated as much as it should be, because I also think that Dean Hall and the original DayZ team was kind of inspired by some of the Project Zomboid elements. I have heard some interviews where they really appraised that game. So that's like, in terms of mechanics and gameplay loop, Project Zomboid is an awesome game, but unfortunately many people are let down by the isometric style and maybe the graphical style, but in terms of gameplay and mechanics, that game is totally awesome.
So we've been looking at the website and some of the environment and that. But one of the questions I do have, and I apologise if it's been in a dev blog, but with the media, most of the images all seem to be obviously not in the winter. Is there going to be seasons in the game?
Yes, I have actually posted on Twitter a couple winter pictures. There should be at least one. And winter is going to be, because in Finland, snow is like one of the key elements of the year and this season thing. So winter is going to be, there's a couple of options to have that winter survival experience. The first will be that when you start the game, one mode is called like dynamic seasons, where it involves summer, autumn, winter, and spring. And one option is to mod your gameplay in a way that you only play summer or you only play winter, or there's kind of like configurations to this. But the main point of winter in this game is going to be like, even though the base game is going to be a hardcore survival game, the winter is going to be like the Iron Man mode, meaning it's so there's so many different elements to consider when there's snow and cold and water freezes. So that's totally different experience. So I'm planning that the winter would be like deviation from the main gameplay, which is going to be most of the times the summer. But when you want to step few notches the difficulty, there's the winter survival mode for that.
Now, just for those of you who are watching the stream, I do apologise. I live in Australia. My internet is third world, even though we are a first world country. But I'll just close that down. You can see the winter background there. So basically, there's going to be an element of having to prepare to survive the winter period of the map cycle.
Yes, that's one of the game modes, that like dynamic seasons where it changes.
That has made me very, very happy because, that's like I said earlier on. I think before the interview, and you mentioned it, The Long Dark is one of my favourite games. When I'm just not feeling that, wanting to get on and compete with other players, The Long Dark is my go-to game because it's brutal and you can't really reproduce that whole snow factor, and freezing just gives a whole survival element that it's almost an easy one to do, but it's this looks absolutely amazing. And if anyone who knows about that sort of region up in Finland, Russia, and that, it gets brutally cold there, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's I would say like the maximum that I experience when there's a winter is like something minus 30 degrees sometimes. But in Finland and all these northern countries, the snow and winter is so key element to most times of the year. So this game definitely needed that, and that winter survival experience is going to be pretty rough, because all things related to acquiring water and all those key survival resources, everything gets harder when there's snow and cold.
Yep. Now, in the devlog, just trying to remember which episode it was, but you had that lovely graphic which explained the split between the two halves of the map, and that basically one half is going to be a safer zone, and the other half is going to be a more brutal zone. What's going to be the main challenges in the safer side of things for players before they do go and risk it all by going across into the more hardcore permadeath side?
Yeah, basically the safe zone is called Area 05, and it's located on the Finland side of the border zone. And the main ideology is kind of same as spawning in the coast area in DayZ, where you get your initial loot and start your character progression and plan your journey up to the north. The idea is kind of same, but in horizontal map layout, Whenever you go east, the game gets harder, the maps get difficult. But in Area 5, there's these shelters, and for a long time I've been wanting to have that kind of survival game that really makes a realistic approach to shelters, because Scum and all these Deadside and most of the survival games focus on maybe these wooden shacks and sticks and stones, and not all games perhaps, but probably you know what I mean. So having like realistic abandoned buildings that you can like customize the interior and make them feel like your home is one big task that I want to get right, because even though Tarkov has that hideout, that really doesn't feel like your home. It's same for everyone, and there's not much customizability in terms of the looks. So I really want to provide those options for you to decide where you want to like have your bug out locations and food storages, and kind of like because those are your like checkpoints. You can save your gear and loot there, but whenever you go to the map, you lose that gear which you have on that map. So in Area 5, in that safe zone, you're going to have those. And then there's also going to be this like store map, which is in Stalker, you have this like trader campfire mentality where all the like common people on the map kind of like meet and greet, and there's no hostility there. So I want to implement something similar. So in a couple of streams I have already demonstrated some of this, but there's going to be one like store map which is going to have this in-game trader, and it's like demilitarized, so no shooting, or you can actually shoot the guy, but you are going to ruin the trader for you then. And there's all these supply lines. One map, for example, is called Highway. There's a supply truck that goes through that map to the store map, and if you ambush that supply truck, it's going to cut that supply line for the shop, so there's no specific items then there. And some of supplies come through water, some are airdropped, and basically that store map is like this common ground for the bandits and you, without having that like real fear of losing your gear, because it's kind of like same in Stalker, that like campfire mentality. So that's one key element on the Area 5 map. And then there's the border zone, which have these like crossing points, and those will have different gameplay mechanics. For example, some crossing point may have minefield, that's one option you can take. Some crossing point may have a broken bridge, which requires different types of skills, for example, some platforming or movement on top of that rusty broken bridge. Some crossing point might involve some kind of key lock mechanism. For example, there's a boat, but you need gasoline for that boat, or there's an option to smuggle you other side of the border if you have enough bartering items. And different crossing points have different gameplay mechanics, but whenever you cross that red dotted line that is showing on the screen, that's basically the main element of this game. Then there's going to be this like red skull icon on the left top of your screen, and if you die when you cross that border zone, you lose everything, absolutely everything, every save, every gear. And this is kind of like in Stalker, you are already inside the zone when you play the game, but in Road to Vostok, you are not inside the zone until you cross that border, and that Vostok area is basically the Stalker's zone. There's no fantasy elements, but the atmosphere is going to be totally different, the tension is going to be totally different, and I really want to provide that dangerous journey feeling when you cross that border.
So the minute you cross that border, that is the death zone.
Yeah.
Okay, so just clarifying that, because Beans was asking that in chat there, because it's like almost that there's 3 zones, but yeah, so it's pretty much permadeath from this side, and you're safe and you can go back. So just to clarify, just to make it abundantly clear, you die in here, you lose everything you've got in your safe zones saved away in houses and that in Area 5, or does that still stay there?
You lose absolutely everything.
Okay.
Whenever you die on those red maps, you lose all your progress. Yeah. But there's one caveat to this. In terms of customizing your gameplay, the base gameplay of Road to Vostok will have that permadeath. But in single-player games, I find that there's no reason for me to lock or like lock out different styles of gameplay. So in the starting menu, there's going to be ways to configure your experience. So some kind of like custom mode where you can tweak those permadeath settings would be totally fine for me. So basically removing that permadeath for some areas of the game, I don't mind that, but the base core gameplay loop of Road to Vostok will include that permadeath.
Okay, I like that. Let people play the way they want to, but I think I'll be definitely leaning towards the permadeath because it just adds that extra sense of you're risking everything by having a shot at the title when you go across into the main map. Now, you've mentioned AI players. Are there going to be AI in the way of bears, wolves, other things to be worried about?
They are not going to be like really constant hazards for you, but
Yep.
I think in a game like this where the atmosphere is one key element, I think there should be something in the woods to be scared of. For example, if you are moving between maps in the night, I think there should be something that if you hear some stick cracking or wood thing on your back, because if there's nothing, there's no need for fear in those situations. So I want to implement something that can like trigger that fear element in the night, for example. But there's not going to be any fantasy elements, but there will be some wildlife that could be behind your back.
Will they be in Area 5 as well, or just over in the Vostok zone?
Let's just say that the wildlife gets more hostile or more scarier whenever you go east. So everything basically horizontally gets more scarier, more tense in the gameplay, more difficultly in the AI when you move towards the east.
Now, there was something you talked about just recently with the element of, like you said quite clearly, that your initial focus is on single player. Once you've got that sorted, you're going to look at potential co-op, which is great because, sometimes you do want to be able to jump on and play a game with your mate. But one thing that you made a comment about that really intrigued me was you don't want to go into multiplayer, PvP players trying to kill other players, but you definitely want there to be a way that you can know that other players have been there. Is that something you can flesh out a bit more for us now, or is that still in development? You want to keep that under wraps until you've got more meat on the bones, so to speak?
I can totally cover some aspects to this. So basically like small online features that are totally optional. Always the game will be full offline if you want that. But if you want to turn those online options turned on, I think having something like visual clues about the other players being in some maps are fairly easy to implement. For example, there could be like if there's like old wooden like wilderness camping somewhere in the woods, there could be like this journal on the table, and maybe some other player has written something on the journal, and if you come to that map, you can see what there has been, or some footprints on the ground, or maybe the decoration have been changed. For example, if the player has destroyed some doors or something. But I haven't fully designed all these features, but I already knew that implementing some of these like visual elements of other players without actually having to see them yourself is totally doable for this project, and I think those will be implemented if I implement those co-op features. So after that might be the possible time for those.
You mentioned before about how some of the crossing points are going to have special requirements for you to be able to access that particular crossing point. Hardwater Gaming in chat there has asked a good question. Will there be, and not we won't just limit it to contaminated zones, but will there be locations in the death zone that you're going to need to be very prepared for to be able to handle going into, such as, like DayZ has its contamination zones where you need to have the all the NBC gear on. Have you got anything in mind like that you could talk about, or is that still being developed?
Basically, I'm not wanting to like uncover the whole lore for this game, but there's a specific lore that relates what has happened in the border zone and what basically has caused this post-apocalyptic event, and it has involved all kinds of military activity, and basically the Vostok side of the map is going to be pretty rough in terms of visuals, and there's going to be all these destroyed buildings and burnt forest, and the like landscapes is totally different than Area 5. And in that zone there's going to be like different hazards for you. So one can be, for example, there was this contamination thing, so there might be that. There might be some radiation related things, because all those like bad things have happened near that zone, and that are reflected through gameplay when you go that zone. So some of the maps are not that easy to access. They will be open for you, but you are going to need specific gear for those maps before you go there. So it's all comes to this like preparing your journey, and that Vostok is kind of like I want to keep. Nowadays games are so accessible. There's all this information is available on the net. There's wikis and guides, and of course, if Road to Vostok becomes a big success, there will be those guide and wikis. But as long as I can, I'm planning to keep Vostok side of the games totally like blacked, meaning I don't want to show screenshots. I want to provide that unique experience when you first time go through there. This year there will be that public demo 2 in Q3, and there's going to be one more Vostok map available for that vertical slice. So I want to like preserve that experience without showing those actual map what they're going to look like. That having that like wow factor when you cross the border and you feel the music and all the tension rising, and you see that skull icon and permanent. I want to like preserve that and not ruin the experience by showing all these videos and screenshots on those Vostok maps. But basically, all of those Vostok maps are going to be pretty different. There's going to be rural areas and countryside of like ruined atmosphere, but in Russia there's all these like apartment buildings and old Soviet kind of like things. So every map is going to be pretty different and require different kind of items and like protection, if I could say.
Yep. Dynamic events. Will there be events just happening that aren't always there? And
yes,
excellent.
I think these are, especially in single player games, a big thing, because the replayability kind of like depends on these dynamic and procedural things. And for example, one dynamic event, every map is going to have different dynamic events, but in that public demo 1, it's kind of outdated already, but it's on Steam, there was this like jet flyby in that map, and that was one dynamic event that happens, and it's linked to the game world. For example, in the end game, if you can shut down that jet, if you, for example, acquire some like anti-aircraft things and you shut down that jet may crash into some maps to the east, and you can access that crash site. So those events will be linked to different maps. And for example, one map event in that highway map, which is going to be in that public demo 2, is going to be that supply truck. It's going to be different times of day when the truck drives through the abandoned and wrecked cars on the highway. And if you destroy that truck, you can acquire some of the loot, but then the store map will not have that supply, so you're going to like dynamically ruin the economy for that store. So they're all like connected to each other.
What sort of size are we looking at for the map area?
I think the Q1, probably 1 month, 2 months away, I'm going to update that Steam demo and show the example of the visual like fidelity and the map size for all the maps. So it's going to be the double the size of that first demo. I think around 400 meters times 400 meters is kind of like sweet spot in terms of loot and movement and having these different types of scope, weapons and so on. But double the size of the first demo map and different kind of elevations and Some of the maps are more wilderness-like, and some of them are more like constructed areas and buildings and so on.
Okay, so it's not going to be like an open sandbox. It's going to be you move between areas.
Yeah, and there's those transition points which are going to be mostly roads, paths, and passages. But then there's going to be like these like special transition points. For example, you can use boat. You can use some like underground, like these tunnels to access some of the maps. And basically the same idea as Tarkov have these extractions, but in Road to Vostok, there's going to be like everything is transition. You are not going to extract to some menu. You're either going to your shelter or you are transitioning to other map.
And just looking at the color coding here, so the further west you are, the safer it is. The closer you get to the border, the more dangerous it's going to be in each of those zones.
Yep.
Okay.
And the AI is going to behave differently also. For example, in that border zone, there's these guarded outposts, and the AI dynamic, the AI system behaves more like I'm a guard, I must guard this position and not let anyone through. And when you go more west, there's more of this like scavenger and not that kill on sight mentality. And it's kind of like the AI becomes more like thoughtful and hardcore and defensive when you move towards the east.
Yep. So Sploder Pie's just written in the chat there. So it's going to be kind of like Stalker.
If you mean like in terms of like map
Yes.
design and kind of like Stalker Anomaly is pretty good example. If you take out the fantasy elements of Stalker Anomaly and then combine some Tarkov features and DayZ elements, I think that's quite a good comparison.
With the crafting side of the game, now you've mentioned about being able to customize your base, so to speak. What other sort of crafting elements are you looking at for the game? Being crafting of weapons or crafting of shelters, crafting of tools?
I think there's going to be all those things because this game is going. My goal is to like genuinely create the best hardcore survival game out there, and the best hardcore survival game out there needs all of these. And I started last month. I added the weapon attachment systems to the game. That's first iteration in terms of like crafting your weapons. But yes, there's going to be a pretty complex crafting system for all these like survival elements for the game, and you can even there's going to be pretty detailed crafting stuff also. For example, you can make your own like fishing stuff, like your lures, and so I'm not sure if that's the right word, but there's going to be crafting for many aspects of the game, and I don't want to implement that like common crafting thing, which is based on again sticks and rocks and these like really ancient crafting things. I want to have a realistic take on crafting, which involves like real items that we have in modern society, because I'm not sure that many of us would want to like have spears in a post-apocalyptic scenario and all those like pretty ancient craftable things. So there's going to be crafting all over the board, and there's going to be food-related crafting, there's going to be fishing-related crafting things, weapon-related, shelter-related, and all those things.
Medical side of the game is another one that really fascinates me. It's one of the my big bugbears with DayZ in particular. Scum is probably at the other extreme of difficulty when it comes to the medical, whereas DayZ it's fairly basic. Where are you sitting at with the medical side of Road to Vostok?
I would say I'm somewhere between Scum and DayZ. There's going to be pretty extensive medical system in terms of conditions. For example, basic conditions are like bleeding, fracture, rupture, and all those things. But I'm going to have this like linked system, which is based on minor and major conditions. For example, if you get a small cut, you have a minor bleeding. But then if you don't do anything that cut, it might get a minor infection. And then if you don't do anything about the minor infection, it might turn into major infection. And those may trigger other medical conditions. And the idea is to you have to learn to maintain of not having these chain linked medical events which turn from minor to major. And some of the medical conditions are really you have to hurry, because I don't want to have in DayZ and some of the games. I think the having thirst and hunger are pretty turned way up, meaning in real life you can survive pretty long without food, and it's some kind of annoying in some games that food is so forced to you. You have to eat constantly and you have to drink constantly. I don't want to have those kind of specific medical forced things to you, but I'm going to have different. I would say there's going to be around 20 different medical conditions. Some of those will be really well known, and some of those will be kind of you have to learn what that word even means. For example, hypovolemia, meaning losing a certain level of blood. That's a real medical term. So I want to have some level of realism to that.
Yep. Now we'll do some questions, because there's been a few regarding some of the topics we've covered. The engine that you're using for the game, what is it, and how did you decide on that one?
It's Unity, and the specific version is called Universal Render Pipeline. And if somebody is really into game engines, the more in-depth answer is Unity URP long-term support version. But Unity, why I decided that, basically I've made games for over 10 years now. I have always used Unity. Unity is totally capable of delivering this kind of game. And I have taught with Unity. I have all these custom tools for Unity, and basically that's like a hand extension for me. So there's no reason to get any game engines, and this whole Unity Unreal topic is so kind of misunderstood, because it's just a tool. If some Unity developer is really capable, he can make those tools for himself that the project needs. So Unity is kind of was the obvious choice for me.
Yep. Will there be load screens between the areas, or is it hidden? Someone else expanding on that, or will you be able to travel by walking between the different main areas of each zone?
I think the first iteration will have loading screens, but they are going to be pretty quick, so only a couple of seconds of loading. But I have also prepared this scene loading system, which is based on this async operations, meaning asynchronous, and it can handle on-demand loading, meaning you don't have to be in the loading screen. It can make that loading behind the scenes and provide it to you once you have transitioned. But that's going to require some different elements to map design in order to pull that off smoothly. So the first iteration will have loading screens, but I think those loading screens can be dismissed when the project gets more further down along the lines.
Beans asks, I know the lore of this game is going to be told via environmental storytelling, but will this contribute to an overarching story, or will the lore only extend to isolated and differing stories?
If I understand the question correctly, there is not going to be this big red line that is going to be the main storyline for the game. For example, in Stalker, the main storyline is to get to the nuclear facility. But in Road to Vostok, the base gameplay is going to be sandbox, but there's all kinds of small quests that indeed are those environmental things that you can learn, and there's different narratives to different groups of characters. Also in the Vostok side, there's kind of specific group of characters. So I would say it's something in the Stalker, there's small quests and minor storylines and missions, but I'm not going to have this winning condition in terms of the main storyline of the game.
So there's no real end game to this. It's just a continuous ongoing survival.
Yeah, I think the character progression, loot progression, and the shelter customization, if that is done correctly, that should be enough for that end game, so you can tailor that winning condition by yourself.
Yep. In terms of the UI regarding the crafting system, King Rich asks, would it be a simple click and craft from a menu, or something along the lines of a fully animated process of crafting the selected item?
I recently updated the whole inventory system to this like multi-tile Tetris-style inventory where you can rotate and move items along the grid. So I'm going to utilize that system for that crafting thing, and it's going to be basically in the first iteration something along the lines that you have a specific grid of like crafting space, and when you drag and rotate different items to that crafting space, you can craft those items in that space. So it's not going to be one click craft this. It's going to be more of like pull different items to this specific grid, and then you have the options to craft different things.
So just to expand on that a bit more, because crafting is something that I absolutely love in the games. DayZ's is probably one of the most basic. Have one item to get another, combine them together, get something new. Scum, on the other hand, has, if the items are in your vicinity, you can craft it, but it also, which I think is a much better system, but it also makes it a bit easy in that you can easily see what items you need to make something. How is it going to work with Road to Vostok? Is it going to be quite intuitive, or are we going to be able to, one of the good things with DayZ is, especially when you first start the game, once you know the game, you really, there's no challenge to the crafting anymore, because you know pretty much what everything does. Combine a stick and a rag and you get a splint. And is this going to be a lot of experimentation? What happens if I drag this on? Oh, wow, that does that. That sort of thing is what I mean.
I think the ultimate goal would be to have this intuitive system which is based on real life. For example, if some item is sharp, it should cut through fabric and so on. And this multi-tile inventory system supports having like big combos of crafting things. So it's not just one item combined with another item. You can, for example, use 4 different items for specific craft tasks if that is required. For example, some mechanical crafting would need more than 2 items. But basically, if you want to know, in the game dev world, these are called like recipes, and each crafting recipe it's basically totally modular. You can just drag and drop different item combinations, and the output it's that craftable item. And there's no limit, in my system at least, for how many items you have to use in specific. But in terms of intuition for crafting, that's going to need a big item database, because if you have only like small number of items in the game, then the intuition kind of breaks because you don't have enough items for that intuitive gameplay. So I think it's going to take for a while before this project get to the state where I can say that use your intuition. But before that, I think more simpler approach. More basic crafting recipes are needed before I have that large item database.
Yep. And it's still early days, and I imagine you'll be taking a bit of inspiration from how the community reacts to that sort of stuff. So that's really good to hear. Henry Lane has the all-important question. Any information on hardware requirements?
This game is fairly optimized in terms of rendering, because the whole premise of the visual style is kind of like inspired from this old DayZ original mod and Stalker franchise. So I don't use any PBR rendering, and there's no expensive visual tricks for the game. So it's kind of bare bones in terms of the rendering side. It's going to be pretty optimized, and I would say something like NVIDIA 1060 is more than enough to play the game with 60 FPS. And there's going to be, most games only provide you like really surface level options for optimizing your gameplay, but I'm going to, because the nature elements are the most consuming things in most of the survival games. All the trees and grass have so many polygons, and they are overlapping in terms of geometry, so there's overdrawn and all these things. So having to I want to provide like full set of optimization tools for you to like ease that rendering even more. So I would say this game is going to be pretty performant for all hardware.
Okay, I think the majority of people are probably on around about that 1060 or above in most cases. Not all. I know there'll probably be some who are still holding on, but yeah, that's pretty good information to know. So you don't need to have the latest 40 series to be able to play like some games are expecting.
No.
That's good. B has so with the Unity engine, you said you could Snowber. Could you configure like desert environments with sandstorms, jungles for their thickness, or even ocean water environments with full underwater travel?
Sorry, could you repeat that question again?
So with the Unity engine, you said you could snow, but could you configure like desert environments with sandstorms? Basically, I'm guessing the origin of the question is: are you thinking beyond Road to Vostok to creating similar games in different bio areas?
Okay, I get it now. So Road to Vostok is basically in game industry. I'm going to take a kind of like long way to answer this, if that's on mind. But in game industry, games are like made in cycles. Each studio basically have this pre-production, production, post-production, and then most of the studios continue to another game.
Yep.
And the original game gets pretty abandoned and desolated. Road to Vostok is not going to have any of that. I have already named my company to Road to Vostok. I'm not going anywhere. I have no interest of making any other games, any other biomes, because if I want to make the best hardcore survival game out there, I have to have that discipline and mentality that I'm going to stick with this thing. Because most of these games, they have huge potential, but that potential is never reached. And survival genre has definitely suffered, had this mentality. Unfortunately, there have been so many games that have shown that potential, but in the long run they have been abandoned or the promise hasn't been filled. So even if I could make those desert environments and there could be other projects, I'm not going to do that. Road to Vostok is going to be main game for my whole career that I'm going to build so far that I can like genuinely say that this is the best hardcore survival game in the market. And that requires me to like stick with this project. But in terms of like development tools, I have all these custom-made tools for this game, all these nature spawners and terrain systems which support snow and different like projections, whether it's sand, snow, dust, and all those things. So basically, I could do those, but I'm not going to because the environments are based in real-life abandoned locations, and there's no deserts or sandstorms or jungles.
Okay, no, I respect that. That's good.
But in terms of water and underwater, I actually implemented those last month. So you can now go to the water and dive and you lose oxygen, and all those are implemented now.
And I imagine that's going to be very risky because I imagine the water up there is absolutely freezing pretty much all year round. So, yeah, I would say swim at your own risk. There was a question, are there going to be different versions of the game? And I asked No Hack IP Band for an explanation on that. And what he was talking about was maybe a deluxe edition or a standard edition. And if so, what will be the differences between the different versions of the game we can purchase when it's full release?
I'm going to keep things really simple and straightforward. There's only going to be two types of like packages you can buy. There's the base version, you get everything, and there's the supporter version, which is a little bit expensive, but you get the same stuff, but you can support me with a little higher price point if you want. Maybe I add like some original soundtrack, but there's not going to be any DLCs, microtransactions, nothing that like affects the base price point. And I'm pretty confident that there's not going to be any changes to this, and this is kind of been my main thing from the get-go that there's the pricing model and monetization is pretty totally straightforward and transparent. There's no like hidden agendas to this. So if you buy Road to Vostok, you get Road to Vostok, and that's it.
Look, I applaud you for the no microtransactions. I think 99% of gamers have had it up to here with bloody microtransactions. As for DLCs, I would ask you, and chat, feel free to roast me if you want, but I would ask you not to rule it out, because you just never know what is going to be the financial situation in 5 years from now, and you may need to do a DLC to continue to get funding to continue supporting the game. So yeah, a DLC, if done right, I think everyone can get behind. Microtransactions, EA and all those other companies, they can stick them where they are, where the sun doesn't shine. But yeah, don't rule out a good DLC, because you may need to, and we may want you to. So yeah, but I really appreciate the fact that you're just making a game that doesn't require us to buy a season pass or special skins and all the rest of it, because there's just too much of that. Yeah, I think you're winning over most of the people in chat with your opinion on that.
Yeah, I think there's no other way of doing this than this way. And in terms of DLCs, this is all tied to like financial planning of the production, and because I'm doing like 99% of the things totally by myself. For example, I can give some specific examples. For example, yesterday I was doing new character arm models for the game, and I needed some like jacket sleeve textures for the game. So I went to the local flea market. I bought the like 50-cent jacket. I used scissors and cut the like sleeve part of it. I photographed with my smartphone and added to the game. And this whole like one new asset cost me 50 cents. And all this production is all about controlling that burn rate. And because I have done all of these things by myself, the burn rate of Road to Vostok is super low compared to like having a real team behind this. And if you have a real team, and I'm not saying that I'm not going to have freelancers and so on in the future, but if I would have fancy offices and big budget production, then I wouldn't be so confident about the DLC thing, because now I can know that if this game succeeds in commercially, there's no like real expenses for me in terms of like I need to make this much in order to compensate all this like financial efforts for this game. So it's a like this decision to do these things by myself isn't for my ego or something. It's also for these reasons that the burn rate is so low that I can manage this project in a long run without having those microtransactions or paid DLCs or anything.
Okay.
That was kind of like confusing explanation, but hopefully you understand what I meant.
No, that does. I have a personal question. Is this man going to feature in an Easter egg somewhere in the game?
Who man?
I've just shared the screen. So if you click on who I'm streaming, but Simo Haya, the White Death.
I'm actually not seeing the. Okay. Now you mean yes. Simo Häyhä.
Yes.
Not because this game is realistic. So I'm unfortunately he can't be in the current lore of the game, but maybe there's some legacy or heritage of him. So
yeah, that's like an Easter egg of some sort. I think it'd be a crying shame for a Finnish ex-military person designing a game set in Finland not to have an Easter egg honouring probably the most famous Finnish soldier of all time that I can think of.
Yeah, one main thing for these like nationality things is that even though this game takes place in Finnish-Russian border zone and all the places are based in real life abandoned locations, I don't want to like force you to these like shoes that you are now this Finnish protagonist or something, and you have to like play as a Finnish character. I want this game to be totally open to any countries that you play in, and I don't want to force this narrative to you that you are in this different nation and you play this character. There's going to be lots of Finnish things and lots of Russian things, but I'm not going to force those things to you.
Look, DayZ's done that pretty well. Not many people, when they're playing DayZ, immediately think that they're Cherno-Russian in any way, shape, or form. They're just a survivor who somehow ended up there. So that's not. I don't think that's anything that most people would be worried about either way. Do you have any indication of how much you're looking at for the cost of the game so far? Zada asks.
Yeah, the base early access version, these are totally transparent numbers, and they are also on the website. It's going to be $10 for the early access, and the supporter version will be $20 for the early access. Same game, you get exactly the same thing. And for the full release, the base price will be $20, and the supporter version will be $30 or $40.
Yep.
But $10 for the early access, $20 for the full release. And no other transactions on top of that.
That sounds very reasonable. Sploded Pie does say that, and again, I actually agree with Sploded Pie. A DLC for a cosmetics pack could be nice, or other extra content. I've always never really had an issue with if it's purely cosmetic and it doesn't change, the actual gameplay too much. But again, being a single player game, I don't think that's as big of an issue as it is with multiplayers. But if needed, that could be a great way to enable us to provide support down the line for the project. I
must say one thing related to DLCs. DLCs is basically like self-life extensions to games, and these are related to projects that are like in cycles. Before the studios head to more other projects, they might do these DLCs, but like mentioned, I'm not going to go anywhere, so there's no reason for me to use this word DLC, because they are just updates for me. I'm going to update and patch the game until it's the best hardcore survival game on the market. So there's not going to be DLCs in Road to Vostok. They are going to be just updates towards that goal, which is the best hardcore survival game.
Beans asks how many languages are going to be available on launch.
It's actually a question that I haven't considered that much. I have had lots of emails related to localizations and languages, but I answered this that it depends if there's some help in terms of I don't have to do these things by myself. So I'm guessing all the basic that you would get in any game, I think those would be pretty easy to figure out, but I haven't, to be honest, developed these systems now in that sense that they support multiple languages. I'm just focusing on the progression, and once I hit that point when I have to figure out these language things, then I might consider. But in terms of voiceovers and the main audio elements of the game, well, there will be Finnish, English, and Russian voiceovers. Yep. But in terms of text and UI, I think supporting as much of languages as possible, if there's help, is totally doable.
So basically, if you've got any experience in that sort of stuff, folks, send Auntie an email and he might be able to work something out with you. But yeah, that's great. B asks, and this is a good question, how in-depth are the gun attachment systems going to be? So basically on one extreme, you've got, the gun porn of Escape from Tarkov, where they go into, basically the type of screws you're using to hold the weapon together. And then you've got the more conservative like DayZ or PUBG, where it's a simple click and drag system.
I would say it's, again, between DayZ and Tarkov, and these things will be implemented in layers. So, for example, in order to keep with this progression that I have currently, I'm doing things in an iterative way. The first iteration is pretty simple. You can only change the optics, the muzzle, and the magazine, and it's now implemented to the game. On the next iteration, you can change the underrail or the handguard. You can change the stock, and then it's pretty much on par with DayZ's customization. But I'm going to take things a little further from that and have some of those Tarkov elements and canted sights and all those things, but I don't want to take that so far when it would be all about the guns and the modding. The environment and the border zone and the Vostok is the main selling point of this game. I will have quite extensive weapons modding system, but not as extensive as Tarkov. I don't want to like you have to know all these different rails and connections to different attachments. I'm more or less towards DayZ, but still somewhere between DayZ and Tarkov would be my answer.
At its core, regardless of all the exploring, looting, crafting, medical sides of the game, it's going to be a shooter. And as an ex-military person yourself, you're probably like me in that I do sometimes, and I'm guilty of sometimes wanting too much realism. The games you played in the past, I'm assuming you played Escape from Tarkov. You've said you played DayZ and Arma. It sounds like you played Scum as well. What's been some of the things that have annoyed you the most when it comes to the way the weapons handle in PvP, in the combat? And what are you trying to implement to make your game stand out or improve on any of those issues that you've seen with that all critical aspect of most of these shooter games? You can go too far with it, but pretty much all games, like there's a big conversation in DayZ at the moment about the way the lack of weapon inertia. You see some videos of there's a very skilled PvPer from Poland called Toprek, and the guy treats a Mosin like it's a pistol. He's able to just whip it up and one tap a person. And if you've ever shot a long rifle, you know that that's not really possible. The Mosin in particular is quite a cumbersome beast. And she takes a while to get steady in that. What are your thoughts on that, and what are you looking at with the game so far, and with your end goal with that?
I think one of the main elements to this is like the weapon weight and the weapon stats that are linked to the attachments and how many things you are putting to your weapon, because everyone who has a weapon experience knows that holding a weapon up in a high ready position for specific time is pretty rough, and it's going to affect your hands pretty significantly and affect your aiming and weapon sway and all that. And most of the games are pretty easy in terms of like keeping weapon up, and that's one element that I wanted to implement from the start, that you have to lower your weapon and you have to like get used to this mouse scroll thing, that whenever you are not aiming somebody, you should remember to lower your weapon in order to save that arm stamina. Those values in my demo and that are totally unbalanced yet, because there's no reason to balance things this early, because the things are changing constantly. But I think the weapon weight and the inertia is definitely something that I can get to pretty realistic levels. And in terms of my background and knowledge about weapons, I'm totally honestly, I have mentioned that I don't know all these things yet. For example, in my military background, I have only used like AK variants and these Eastern types of weapons. I don't have that much experience with more NATO weaponry. But whenever I knew that I have this like hole in my knowledge, that this game needs this knowledge, I contacted couple of guys who are like really experts with weapons. I have been in the range days with them, and slowly I'm gaining that experience that I can work with weapons and all these like nuances to weapons, that I can make these realistic things in the future. But the main like issue now is that even though I know exactly what I would have to code and do in order to implement those things, I have to have the discipline that I'm not diving fully just only weapon stuff, because there's only just me, and the progression of the game would die instantly if I would be only the weapon guy. So I have to like hold myself back in terms of like, no, Antti, you can not do this much weapons now, you have to do something else. And it's all about the balance act and iteration. But I think compared to first demo, when I update this version 2 demo somewhere a couple of months from now, I think the weapon handling is already much more realistic. I have added arms IK, the bones move now dynamically, the wrist movement is more dynamic, dynamically, and I think it's getting better over time, and it's just a matter of like maintaining that discipline that I have to work with multiple areas. But I would say that the inertia and the weapon weight will be pretty realistic in this game.
Have you given any thought to modding support for the game? And if so, what's going to be the options available to people? Are they going to be able to create their own custom maps, for example, or is it just going to be more cosmetic or adding different weapons, or no modding support at all?
This topic is kind of like really hits home for me because I'm a big fan of Stalker, and like you probably know, Stalker has pretty much been alive thanks to modding communities.
Yeah.
And
Daisy also armor.
Yeah. And I only see that modding is only, it can provide positive things. I don't see any negatives related to modding, and many of tools that I have already designed for myself, I have already like put a little bit thought to the design process that would this be useful to modders also. And in terms of like assets and all, I already open source some of the visual assets, and I'm going to continue that like mentality, because if I want to make this vision that I'm making here, I think having like really in-depth modding toolkit and like open environment for people to add their own stuff and iterate different features is really, it only increases the replayability of the project.
Auntie, so far you are saying all the right things for gamers to love you more and more. No microtransactions. You're not a fan of adding DLCs that people have to buy, and you're fully supporting modding. Keep this up, and we're going to be raising statues in your memory in the near future, because you're ticking all the boxes for me and a lot of people, I think.
And I think these boxes are really like, if you use common sense, I think all the developers knows that these are the boxes that you should tick, but major productions can't ever tick these boxes because there are all these like financial barriers and restrictions. But this project has been designed specifically to tick these boxes. All the financial side of things, all how I operate in terms of pre-production and production, the whole thing has been planned in order so I can tick these boxes. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely something that I want to pursue. And when I ship the game, I don't want that these are like typical marketing words that I want to like hype that the game is going to do all this cool stuff, but I'm actually going to do this.
Have you been happy with the reception from the community so far? Like I've watched quite a few videos on, and I did a bit of research before this, and one guy in particular, I was quite surprised. Big Fry, you probably heard of. And he's usually incredibly critical of games. And when I saw his trailer for your one, and he was like, "This game looks pretty good," I was like, "Damn! If you've got Big Fry bigging you up, you're doing something right." What's been your reaction to the pretty much overwhelmingly positive commentary from the community out there about your game?
Kind of. At the same time, I'm kind of surprised, and still I kind of understand why people might feel those positive things about this project. Firstly, if I explain that why I'm surprised, if you think about the post-apocalyptic early access survival game genre, that's pretty rough to get into, because there's have been so much vaporware and empty promises that I would be skeptical, no matter who's the developer, no matter what kind of team. I have been burned so many times, and the rug has been pulled under me, so I would be extremely cautious about any games. And I can even say this to my project: when I first released the first devlog, I would be skeptical, especially if there's one guy doing it. Can he do the thing that most of the guys don't have the skills to do? So I totally get if somebody is really skeptical about this, and how I want to like handle this skepticism is through those public demos, which are going to be totally free. Everything is totally transparent, and I'm not going to ask any money until the game is at that stage that I can like genuinely say that this is worth the price and this has fulfilled the promises that I have said. Until that, I'm not going to ask any money. And if you want to support me, there's the Patreon, but there's no other incentives than that. But in terms of the support, it has been totally awesome. The subscribers and the following has been kind of mind-blowing, and I have had some actually issues at some point because even though I have this military background, I have never had the experience of this publicity before. And it's kind of like you have to learn different skills in order to handle this. For example, my email has totally kind of like ruined my productivity in some cases. If you have hundreds of emails per day, you have to learn the tools in order to handle that inbox. And in terms of like handling different comments, because if you have the knowledge and the skill, you would like to counter and argue with somebody, but you have to like step back and know that this is not the fight you want to get into. And I'm more of a guy that want to like instead of talking and arguing, I want to show and like experience it yourself and like speak through the project. But the support has been great, and it's definitely a motivational factor, and it's awesome that there are people who are interested in this type of game.
You did explain to me in the conversation we had leading up to this one, but probably on that topic, a good segue into, I asked if you have a Discord. Would you like to tell everyone why you don't have a Discord set up yet?
Yeah, sure. Having a Discord might be something that would affect my productivity in sense that it might be a distraction, and also in that sense that I haven't never managed a Discord that hosts probably thousands of people. So I am not even aware of what kind of distractions that would bring to me. So I'm kind of like weighing the plus and the like positives and negatives. And currently the project is progressing so well, and all the things are showing like positive numbers, and it's going well. So it's basically the question is, why would I want to risk that?
Yeah.
What do I gain by having this big Discord? I understand that Discord is like the home for the community, but as long as there's just me, that community there's a risk that it would affect the development in a negative way.
Yep.
In terms of production speed.
Yeah, totally understand. I think there'd be a lot of people who'd be willing to put their hand up to help you manage one, but I totally understand your reluctance to get into one, especially at this early stage when you've got more important things to be worried about with the the development of the game, getting it ready for release.
And I also think that having Discord would be ideal in that point of the project when there's a lot of gameplay stuff to discuss about. So one demo on the Steam isn't enough to like hold these like ongoing discussions about the game and content creation, but after that public demo 2 or near towards the early access, then there's a lot of more gameplay available and content to discuss about. So I think the timeline is it's not now good for the Discord.
I like what Beans just wrote in chat there. Don't start a Discord, you will lose your sanity. Unfortunately, Beans, he already has a Twitter, so like most of us, he's probably losing his sanity just being on Twitter. But yeah, No Hack IP Ban asks, how heavy in the gore is the gore in the game? Can you shoot body parts off, or is it? Yeah.
I would say it's pretty toned down in sense of like it's not going to be a horror game or not like super violent game, but there's going to be all the basic elements, the blood decals, and I think one like core element is the best way for these type of games is some kind of like good animation and ragdoll system that really displays the like suffering when you get shot. And I think that's more compelling in a realistic survival game than having like dismemberment and all these like pretty rough core elements. I much rather have really on point ragdoll system and animation system for specific hitboxes and really nailing that shooting experience that feels. It sounds kind of weird when we are talking in this context, but satisfying when you shot somebody in the video game. That's a specific skill set that you need to acquire for the developer to make that satisfaction shooting experience. And I think I'm going to prioritize that over making those core elements.
I apologize if I've missed it, but is there going to be soft skills in the game that you get better at, or is it pretty much going to be basically like what Scum has with the soft skills, that as you do something you start to get better and better at it? Or is it going to be more like DayZ where no, there's no soft skills, it just depends on your personal skill as a player?
This is actually one topic that I'm still kind of, it's on the design board, but because at the first I kind of like levitated towards the, I would say, Project Zomboid kind of thing, that you have to like, you have weaponry skills, melee skills and survival skills and all those different kind of like slots which can have points and you can acquire more skills. But then when I have worked for this game for now nearly 2 years, I have actually now kind of like moved towards that the skills should be like in-game, meaning the recoil skills should be that the actual skill is to like learning to counter balance that recoil with your mouse, not just some arbitrary number skill.
Yeah.
And I think this type of game, the only skill that I'm already kind of like locked into is one that is related to trading and bartering, which is that Store Map is going to have that in-game trader, and there's going to be some skills to that. But other than that, I'm currently not into making different weapon points or something like that. I want to implement the features that are more like gameplay skills than some numbers.
Okay, that's good. Beans asks, from what I've seen, No Minuteman was just saying, if everything is going according to your plan, don't change it. The game is more important. Don't worry about Discord or other distractions. So, yeah, and I said I totally agree. Beans asks, from what I've seen of the AI, the basics are really impressive. But when you get the time, will you add more advanced features like Ready or Not, with surrendering, taking cover, suppressing fire, etc.? On that, I want to add to it because it was something I was thinking about before. When you were talking about the combat and the ragdoll system, what if you injure the AI? Will they potentially offer to surrender, or will there be a vocal? You'll hear them screaming in pain or anything like that, and can you, offer them the chance to, if you surrender? Is there going to be any dialogue like that with the hostile AI?
Yes, definitely, and exactly those things that you mentioned, those suffering and getting hurt and all this different kind of ragdoll stuff is definitely on the line. But in terms of like AI systems and the brain of the AI, I would say that I'm not sure if you're familiar with how the Stalker does it, but it has this thing called A-Life, which kind of like works in a way that each AI agent is totally independent and they can roam the game world whenever they want. They can do different kind of tasks, and this creates a situation where the player feels that he's no longer the center point of the game world. He's just one survivor scavenging and roaming along with the others. And I like really this mentality that you are not the hero of this story. Nobody cares about you, because we have those like games so much in the market where you're the center point and you're like the main hero of this story. I don't want to do anything like that. I much rather have an AI that is totally independent and really like advanced features to it, so you can have that feeling that I'm just one guy in this world and this world is constantly moving and dynamic. Because single player games, it's kind of like make or break feature, because if the AI is totally dumb and soulless in a single player game, the replayability dies pretty quickly. So yes, there's going to be more advanced features in the future.
Okay. With the actual combat side of it, how brutal is the damage going to be? In that, you could be insta-killed at any moment, or is it going to be a bit more forgiving? Obviously, some of that will come down to, I'm guessing there's going to be armor you can have in the game. So are you leaning more towards, to flesh that out for people? I still remember the very first time I played Operation Flashpoint. And I was treating it just like I was playing a Call of Duty game. And I heard one shot and my character was dead. And I sat there just going, what just happened? Did I just get, what? Why did I die so quickly? And it took me a few days to realize that this game is not like anything I'd ever played before, in that it started my whole journey, which ended up with me playing DayZ. Searching for games that were more than just putting in the plate 4 or level 4 plate armor and tanking 100 rounds before your character even starts to look like he's about to die, to these games where you've really got to think about tactics more if you want to be able to survive. Where are you at the moment with the damage system for the game on the player?
When you have a permadeath game, I think one-shot kill is a no-no, because that's unfair. Even though the situation is kind of like you were in the open spot, I think killing with one bullet to the head in a permadeath game is kind of like, whenever it's a single-player game, it's kind of like annoying, because there's no real you have to have some level of I can even do something about the situation. So having that medical system, and also now I have implemented the character preview and clothing system, so you can wear different rigs clothing and protective stuff. I want that they have some impact on the game. But in terms of how many bullets can you consume before you die, I'm going to keep that pretty realistic, and more of a so that if you get shot, I want that it has an impact for your total character. The movement should be kind of you might have some adrenaline rush, so you may not see those effects immediately, so you can sprint to hide or something, because I think even Tarkov, which is really realistic, does this kind of silly to be honest, because most of games, if you get shot, your stamina is kind of drained and you're paralyzed. But in real life, if you get shot to some non-critical part of your body, you may actually even notice it at first, because you're such an adrenaline rush and there's all these elements. That's why soldiers sometimes have to check for each other if there's holes and something, because one shot shouldn't paralyze you totally if you have body armor. So I'm going to keep this kind of it's effective you in multiple areas, but they are long-term effects which can have the chain link stuff, I mentioned with the medical system. You have minor and major medical conditions, but in terms of if you get shot multiple times, that's pretty much game over then. So not anything arcadey like Call of Duty or something. Yep. Pretty realistic, but not immediately paralyzing stuff.
I think because it's an AI enemy as well, if you were talking about player versus player, I really have no issue with it, because it comes down to how good of a player you are versus another human player. But when you're dealing with AI, I do agree and support with your decision there. Negeded asks, what about ballistics and bullet penetration, shooting through planks, sheet metal, thin walls, difference between calibers, etc.? Have you given any thought to that?
Yes, I have actually shown some bullet penetration clips already in some of my videos, and that system is totally ready, but I disabled it because there's so much new assets coming each month and different parameters with weapons, so it's constantly trying to balance that stuff with the new features. So I disabled it, those ballistic stuff for a while, and once the game is in a state that there's not that much changing in every month in terms of environments, then I apply those ballistics back, so I don't have to run with that system constantly. But yes, there's going to be all these it's going to affect the voice of the impact shock. The particle effect will be different. The penetration amount will be different. All those things will be in the game.
Beans asks, how devastating will suppression be? Will that be something that you can actually do to the AI, and will they react accordingly?
Yes. I especially I'm wanting to implement these like ambush-like situations where you're being pretty badly ambushed because the name Road to Vostok is all about choosing your road for that permanent zone, and some of those roads will lead you pretty interesting situations, and if you handle those situations poorly, you might get ambushed in some of the like crossing points or something, and then you're screwed, and you will be suppressed pretty hardly. And I want the main element of what I'm trying to say, I want to implement both ways this like mentality where you can say, nope, this fight is not for me, I'm not prepared. Okay. And you can turn back. That's basically the whole main thing for this sentence.
Now, I'm guessing the name is Captain Chaos, Captini Chaos. I'll have to get you to translate that for us, if you could, and then tell us what the answer to the question is.
Yeah, it's basically said he had one input-related bug where the character kind of kept bobbling all around, and there was this like input vector issue. And yes, he asked, is it fixed now? And yes, it is. It will be updated in the public demo version 2.
Excellent. B, we'll come back to that one when we're closing up, because it's not really related to Road to Vostok, but I think it is quite interesting. But we'll save that for at the end. Moving target. Will the game have animals to hunt for food? Maybe fishing feature for more survival gameplay?
Fishing will be... I actually implemented the first fishing mechanics last week, and they will be extended next week, and they will be playable in the public demo 1 version 2. And these will involve different types of fishing. You can use actually I don't know what they are called in English, but there's different types of fishing available. And in terms of hunting, I think those are in the future implemented, because there's going to be a lot of AI related things to that, so I don't want to deal those now. But yes, there will be some hunting related things, but not much. I want to keep that in a way that the food is pretty scarce, and the environment that is within the border zone and Vostok, I think not many animals want to live there either. I think the hunting, fishing thing will be more relevant on those Area 5 maps.
Okay. Cunning Linguist, how heavy will the looting, crafting, base building aspects be? We sort of touched on that before, Cunning, in that a lot of that's still in development, but I'll let you just touch on that again, Auntie.
Yeah, I basically want... The looting will be... I want to really fix all the main mistakes that I have seen from survival games, meaning I want to really make... I could say I want to make the best looting experience in any survival game, and I think I have the basic tools already developed for that, but I need tons of items and I need tons of environments before you can see that looting thing in full scale. But I actually made a full devlog about... I compared to DayZ how I want to add this really dynamic stuff and not static loot spawns and all this. That's already covered some of these aspects, but I want to make one of the best looting systems in survival games. In terms of base building, I would say that the goal is to have a system that you can say that this is my home, that you can customize really some place or environment and decorate it so it feels like I live here. Most of the games only provide these wooden shacks and static concrete blocks, so they are not really your home. I want to, in Road to Vostok, that you can really customize your shelter in a realistic manner.
Look, I am I really suck at PvP. I used to be okay, but as I'm getting older, I'm losing the edge. But one thing I take great pride in is being the best damn base bitch that any group can have. And I love to have a nice base. I love to have it organised and good covered shelters, whatever else I can build. So the more on that side of things, the happier I'm going to be. And I'm sure there's other people like me, but yeah, I will cry when I die in the red zone and lose everything and have to start all over again. But that's just more motivation to get back in and start again, because I love bases. I really enjoy having a nice base to go back to after you've been out on a scavenge run and all the rest of it. But yeah, that's great.
And I think one sub feature also that really complements this system is that I have already implemented this container system, which is based on that anything in the game world that looks like it can hold stuff is lootable. And on top of this, there's this item placement system that I think is really, really important for survival games, because when you have these shelters, in Road to Vostok, you can actually place your items whenever you want. Same as in Long Dark, you can rotate your weapons, put them on the table. You can really do this prepper thing. You can have different kind of medical items lined up in different tables, and you can have these weapon walls if you want, and all this customization in order to feel that this is my shelter.
Will there be a kind of cleaning mechanics? Because I know in Metro, when you get in mud and dirt and stuff, clean it off with chemicals. Is this going to be something like that? So I'm guessing you're talking more about a hygiene sort of thing there, B. Is that something that your players going to have to be aware of, their personal hygiene? Will that affect their medical status at all?
Yes. There's going to be conditions to different things. There are going to be consumable-based conditions. There's going to be weapon-related conditions. And there's all this medical stuff that are linked to these things. And yes, you have to keep some things clean in order to avoid those chain link events on your medical system. And also in weapons, even though the question wasn't about weapons, I'm going to have kind of similar system like in Stalker Anomaly, where you have different weapon conditions and you have to maintain those. And I think there's a way to make this in a way that it's not, it doesn't feel like a chore, but it still kind of fits well in the game loop, and it's not annoying, because badly implemented weapon conditions is really annoying if the weapon jams totally unrealistically and there's no way for you to handle it, and it's totally randomized. So I'm going to implement some sort of condition system to most of the game items.
That's awesome. I like that. Beans is asking, will you be able to point shoot?
Yes, you can actually do it already. It was implemented 2 weeks ago.
Excellent. That answers that one. Halil Braho, pardon me. Will there be a game mechanic where guns can break or get stuck during the fight, maybe maintaining them, cleaning the guns, changing the damaged parts? Now, I'll elaborate on that one a bit. One of the frustrations I have with DayZ is pretty much there's only one jam. One of the things I love about Scum is there's a variety of ways that your weapon can fail on you. And is that something you're looking at, or are you going to keep it a bit more simplistic?
There's going to be multiple ways the weapon can malfunction, and I already implemented the ARM IK system, which supports that you can rotate your weapon in different perspectives, and I want to implement all those in 3D, so there's no UI element or this, so you can actually rotate your weapon and inspect in front of you and see if the slide is jammed, there's a cartridge jammed in there, or there's different kind of magazine related, I don't know how to say it in English, but different kind of malfunctions that could be inspected in 3D.
Zadar is asking, do you have a set spawn point, or can you move the spawn point in area 5? So is there a set map or mini-map area that you always spawn in, or is it going to be a random one across a number of places?
You can kind of the whole premise of the game is that you can kind of plan your road to that border zone. So there's going to be most of the
I think they're
transition
talking more
point.
about when you first spawn in. So like consider the long
okay.
dark, for example. You can choose a location, or you can set it to random, or is it how is that working when you first
It's
start?
going to be a little randomized. You are going to spawn, obviously, when the game is based on this horizontal difficulty, you are going to spawn somewhere in the west. Let's say that.
Okay. What have we got? How large is the map? Tuna, we did cover that before. I'll bring up the there we go. So yeah, what Beans is saying, the map is sectioned off, so it's not a sandbox like say DayZ or Scum. It's more like, I think you likened it to Stalker Anomaly, was it, Artie?
Yeah, that's pretty good comparison, and you can actually test the map size and how the production ready map layout feels in that public demo 1 version 2, which is coming in Q1 this year.
And basically what you'll do is you'll just sort of fast travel between the different sections. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep.
It's there will be some special transitions which involve some vehicles. For example, you can take the boat and you actually have to drive that boat through different ocean areas or something. But most of the transition points will be like in Stalker.
Yep. There we go. I think we have caught up on everything. If anyone has any other questions, now's your time to ask. Otherwise, Auntie, is there anything else that you want the community to know that we haven't already covered? I think we've pretty much covered almost everything I wanted to. What about yourself? Was there anything you really wanted to get out there to everyone?
Not specifically. There was some great questions. Mostly, I just want to say that this project requires a bit of patience, because in order to make all these cool things come to in reality and not just talk and these fancy words and phrases, that's going to take some time. But this production has been planned for a long time, and I'm not going anywhere. So if you decide to jump in and follow this game, I can ensure you that this project will not be abandoned. I'm sure that many developers have said that before and they have abandoned the production, but I understand that building that trust and commitment takes a long time. I have been, I have publicly said these things almost a year now. So
I'll say something for you, Auntie. I know you're very concerned about that, but I have a lot more faith in your ability to deliver this game than I do in Fantastic's ability to deliver the day before. No shade really intended, but my God, what you have delivered looks so much better than what we have seen from the day before, and that's meant to be releasing in a few months' time. So yeah, I reckon if I put a poll up on my Twitter, what game are you more confident will actually be released, Road to Vostok or the day before? I think you would win hands down, mate, because you're ticking a lot of the boxes for everyone. So a couple of more questions there. Will there be factions you can join? So what I think it would be a bit more like what they were talking about with Dead Matter when that was first coming out, with traders that you can become more aligned to or anything like that?
Not specifically. You can sort of there's this skill that is related to trading and this specific store map and these suppliers, but there's no professions and these you can be a policeman and have these different skills, and there's no stalker-like factions. There will be kind of factions related to the map, because the border zone holds different kind of AIs, the Vostok holds different kind of AIs, and they kind of have their own independent AI system. But in terms of player, I want to provide a game world that you can tailor totally for your story. I don't want to lock you into different professions or skills. And I think there hasn't been that much survival games recently that do a good job in this really providing a sandbox experience. And Road to Vostok, I want to provide that you can really tailor the gameplay experience for you. And even in the game name is Road to Vostok. The Vostok is never like forced to you. Of course, there's some quest that requires for you to go there. But if you want to have more casual style, you enjoy fishing, you enjoy base building, and you want to have this kind of survival experience, there's no need for you to go there.
Yep. Unless you're an absolute loot whore like I am. So I'll be going there. I'll be going there because I've got to get that sweet, fat, juicy loot. I think we'll do it there with questions, folks, because we've got a couple of other ones I haven't covered yet, and we're coming up on 2 hours now, which I think is a nice round number. And Auntie's got a game to make for us all, folks. We don't want to tie him up too much longer. Good question from Zadar there. So if you die in Area 5, will you spawn back at your base if you have one, or will it be a random spawn? And I'll elaborate on that. Will you be able to get back to your body and get your gear back, or is that body and whatever it had on it gone?
The body is gone. You can't get back to that. So if you similar like in Tarkov, if you die on the map, you lose the gear you had on the map, but you will be spawned in the last shelter you were. So at least that's how the game currently works. Yep. I think there's some designs to this that might add more spice to this dying in Area 5. But currently, if you die in Area 5 map, you lose the gear you had with you, and you spawn in the shelter you were previously.
Okay, I like that. That's brutal. That's good. That's really, really good. And from Najened, I hope I said your name right. Sorry if I didn't, buddy. Next dev stream when? I really like those, and I'll second that. I've been enjoying them as well.
I think next week would be kind of ideal. I have been on this development holiday where I decided, I'm not sure if you have followed my Twitter, but I basically posted last month that I didn't do any content creation for last 2 months pretty much. Yep. And I basically made this holiday where I can focus totally on the development, and there's no distractions and content creation, and it has been really paying off in terms of progression. But now when I have ended that development holiday, I'm back to that original streaming, making each month the development update, because this project needs that transparency, even though it requires some work for me. But I'm getting used to that streaming mindset more and more, and it's easy way for me to answer questions and show some development stuff. So I think next week would be next time for the stream.
Awesome. And I think Beans sums up how a lot of us are feeling. I would just like to say thanks to Auntie. He is unmatched in his transparency, and he doesn't shy away for the details, and his work ethic makes me jealous. Without a doubt, my favourite dev. I think you've from the 30 to 40 people who've been in here watching the stream live, and from those who will watch the VOD when I upload it. I will private it just because I've just had the intros, outros, that sort of stuff, and then I'll have it up ASAP for everyone. But I think for those who are going to watch the VOD of this as well, I think you've made a lot of us feel a lot more comfortable with supporting you. I hope that everyone considers signing up to the Patreon if you can afford it. If you can't, great, but continue to do what you can to help spread word about the game. Share it on social media. When you're in your Discords chatting with your buddies, make sure they've heard of Road to Vostok and share it. One thing, B has asked this question a few times. You said you're heavily influenced by Stalker. What are your thoughts of Stalker 2, the information coming out about that game?
Oh man, I have so many thoughts about this, but to keep it short, there's only one game, one upcoming game that I'm excited about currently, and it's Stalker 2.
That's the day before.
I'm not excited about that, unfortunately, but Stalker 2 I'm excited about. But to be honest, the visual style is so high in that project, at least what they have shown. And personally, I've been teaching how to make that visual stuff, and I know how time-consuming it's to maintain that level of fidelity for a big game world. So I'm really unfortunately, I fear that it's going to take for a while before that game comes out. I might be wrong, but because the graphics are looking one of the best I have ever seen in a video game.
Well,
and Stalker has never been about graphics before. It's all about the experience and atmosphere. And this time, I think the graphics are the front line of their development, which is totally cool. But it's kind of like I fear that it's going to consume so much development time. It has to consume that so much development time because making that kind of like post-apocalyptic environment, there isn't any pre-made asset packs for all those environment pieces. They has to be totally tailored and handmade in order to like preserve that Stalker experience. So I think that game is going to take for a while before it comes out, or they are going to have some compromises for developing the product in like certain area and then like providing certain area after the initial release or something. But if they are going to do open world Stalker with that level of graphics, I think that's quite a task to complete. But I'm really cheering up for them, and that's definitely the game that I'm excited about.
Well, I'm going to be very, very selfish here, and I've never played the original Stalker game. I've watched content on it. My son is a Stalker fan, and he's watching Stalker 2 with interest, but I'm going to be selfish and say I hope they take a bloody long time, because I think that there's only one danger to Road to Vostok, and that's you start playing Stalker 2 and get that absorbed with it that you forget all about this game that we all here are waiting for so passionately. So take your time, Stalker 2. We've got a guy who needs to finish a game called Road to Vostok for us first. So, yeah. Auntie, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with myself and answer the questions of the people who turned up for the live stream. I wish you all the best, mate. I'm really excited for this. A first-person game where, when you just want to relax and, be able to press the... Oh, that's actually one... Will you be able to pause it when you're in the red zone, or is in the red zone? No, there's no pausing, no... oh crap, there's someone there, I'll just pause it quickly and work out what I'm going to do. Is that something you've considered?
I think pausing the game or having these like player-driven breaks in the Vostok side of things, I'm going to like provide that Vostok experience in a way that you're really like stick to your seat, and you're like the tension is so high that if there's going to be a break in Vostok side, I have made something wrong, because I want that experience to be really captivating, and I want it to be like a loot coupling style idea that when you return from the border zone back to your like, now I can rest and now it's time for a break. Yeah, that's basically my answer to this.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much, Auntie. I'm really looking forward to the next major update. And yeah, next week, make sure you subscribe to the Road to Vostok YouTube channel, folks, and keep your eye open for his next dev stream. You've been releasing a lot of info, and like Bean said, everyone's appreciating your transparency and honesty with how you're developing your game, mate. I'm very excited for it, and I wish you nothing but the best. And don't forget to sign up to the Patreon if you can afford it, folks.
Okay, thanks for having me.
All the best, and we will see you next time. I'm doing another interview this weekend with a variety streamer called Rixler T. I'll have some information coming out on the channel about it, but yeah, all the best, everyone. And thank you all so much for hanging around. Say bye-bye.